Hi everyone, my name is George and welcome to episode 1 of Growth Talks, a podcast and video series brought to you by the lovable learning technology heroes here at Growth Engineering. In each episode, we will interview an industry luminary, a learning expert or a training titan in an attempt to pick their brains for as many nuggets of gold as possible and share them with you guys. This week is no exception whatsoever. I spoke to Ed Jervis, who is Chief Disruptor at Inclusion Crowd. Inclusion Crowd are using Growth Engineering's technology to change the narrative around diversity, equity and inclusion. I had a wonderful chat with Ed and he shared so much insight into the current state of organisational DEI and discussed some of the things that we can look to change within that. He is somewhat of a wisdom spouting machine, so I do hope that you guys enjoyed the conversation. With that, sit back, relax, grab your popcorn and enjoy. Firstly, how are you, Ed? Thank you for joining us on the first GE podcast, actually.
Love it. Really delighted to be here. Thanks for having me.
No, well, it's good to have you on as the experienced first guest. You'll probably be holding my hand as a new presenter here. But yeah, firstly, Ed, just wanted to sort of find out a little bit more about you and let us tell you about yourself and a little bit about your passions for diversity and inclusivity.
Yeah, no, as I say, awesome to be here and just amazing to be partnered with Growth Engineering, essentially to bring the world of tech, learning and diversity and inclusion together. So it's a really, really exciting partnership. So I could talk all day about it. So you can stop me where you like. In terms of background, so my passion for inclusion and diversity primarily came from the fact that I grew up in Northern Ireland during the Troubles, and I grew up as a Catholic in a Protestant town. So I was sort of a minority within my hometown with a backdrop of sort of political sectarian violence, essentially in the 80s and 90s when I grew up here. As well as being a minority from a religious perspective, I was also a gay Catholic, and that's really not a great look in the 80s and 90s. So with all of those things together, it really gave me a very early experience of the complexities of how to navigate inclusion and diversity. Well, of course, we didn't call it inclusion and diversity then, and I didn't think of it in those terms. But through the lens of all the things that we know now, it very much is about themes of identity, themes of sexual orientation, themes of religion and belief, and all of these intersections that has given me really a passion for social justice, social value, and intolerance for segregation, sectarianism, and really an insight into what happens when we get inclusion and diversity wrong. It's really, catastrophic socially. And so my passion now is to deploy that, to work in this space, helping organizations to step through all of the difficult processes that we need to do to really up our game when it comes to inclusion and diversity within business, because we really, and organizationally and societally, but we really have a long way to go.
Yeah. And that was, so you obviously talked about like your own experience there, being the driver for your passion, which completely makes sense. Was there like, was that sort of in school growing up, and was there a particular kind of moment that made you think, right, I need to do something about this, or has it just kind of led to this point as a sort of over your life generally?
Yeah, so I mean, I suppose we're all sort of products of all of the cumulative things that happen throughout our lives, and we are a product of all those things, and that makes us. So I suppose each one of those elements goes towards my passion and my interest in getting this right. I think that undoubtedly living in Northern Ireland as a backdrop with that risk, that tension, that threat to life, that, getting it wrong can be very dangerous. Seeing what it does socially and economically to communities and societies, and also on that sort of religious backdrop of, on the one hand, being part of a religion that promotes, peace and love, and the first should be last, and the weakest and meekest among us, and all of those those sorts of things, whilst at the same time being ostracized essentially for being gay, really give me this, as I say, intolerance to hypocrisy, intolerance to anything that's discriminatory, anything that's, you know, prejudicial in nature. And I'm just a fan of the underdog in general. And so when I see that in our society, it really drives me to say, actually, we need to do something about it. And I think the angle that I'm coming from is that we need to do it systemically. We need to do it institutionally. And so my background is in transformational change and culture change. And so that's been really helpful to give a commercial lens to what we need to achieve, because we can talk about, yes, it's nice to be inclusive. Yes, we should all be nice to each other. We should all share our toys and be friends. Or we can say, I'm not racist. I'm not sexist. I'm not homophobic. But the results show us that our systems and institutions aren't reflecting those views. And so it's broken somewhere. And my position is that we need to get smart and we need to get determined around the commercial levers and the organizational levers that we can pull to drive change over the long term, and drive it at the heart of systems and institutions so that we can essentially improve and track that progress.
Sure. Yeah, it certainly makes sense. I think you've got to sort of walk the walk as well as obviously the talk that goes on around it. So,
right.
So yeah, that really makes sense. And obviously that's, I guess, led you to sort of Inclusion Crowd now and sort of here, obviously, us having this conversation. So where does kind of Inclusion Crowd fit into sort of those passions and kind of what are you trying to achieve with Inclusion Crowd?
Yeah, so great question. The reason that I really wanted to position Inclusion Crowd as something very different is because inclusion and diversity in a lot of senses has become an echo chamber. It's been around for a long time. We've heard of D&I training. We've heard of unconscious bias training. We've heard of consultants going in. You know, it's not a new phenomenon. But if we look at the output and the results societally and organizationally, you know, there are no Black chairs. There are no Black CFOs. There are no Black CEOs. You know, we are struggling to get women represented in senior positions who have a P&L, who aren't just a non-exec direct or senior in HR, you know. So from an Inclusion Crowd perspective, we really identified a gap in the market because inclusion and diversity has been around for a long time. It's not a new discipline, but yet the outputs don't match the inputs. We're not seeing the results translate into a speed or rate of change that's fast enough. And I really wanted us here at Inclusion Crowd to get in and disrupt that space in a constructive way to say, yes, you're not racist, you're not homophobic, you're not sexist individually, but systemically, institutionally, you are not producing the results. So where are the women in senior position? How do we get visibility for our disabled colleagues? You know, where is our open and out LGBT plus folks? You know, there are no Black CEOs, no Black CFOs, no Black chairs in the FTSE 100 today, 2021. You know, it's crazy. It's unacceptable. And the problem is that we keep focusing on the effects. So we go off and we train, you know, teams here, or, you know, we go after sort of people who are, you know, they've already drank the Kool-Aid. They get it. They want to work in a nice environment. We need to target it at the structures and the mechanisms internally to change that. Primarily at Inclusion Crowd, we focus on the front door. So what does the recruitment process look like? Where are you fishing for talent? Is talent attracted to your organization? Who's in charge of selection? Are they competent in that selection piece? And before you do any of that, I heard it described recently on LinkedIn, and I like this analogy, you know, around if you're going to put new fish into a tank, you got to clean the tank first. So a lot of these organizations are jumping to, oh, we got to attract talent. But what does the culture of the organization currently look like? Because you're never going to retain them. And so having sort of difficult adult complex conversations about the systems that drive change and that whole transformational culture change piece, as well as making leaders accountable, competent, comfortable in this journey as proper sponsors. What we see a lot of leadership levels saying, yes, that's a great idea. Yes, I get it. Yes, our clients are asking us for it. Yes, I'm on board. But then they palm it off to HR because it's complex. They don't want to say the wrong thing. They're frightened of pronouns. They're scared of Black Lives Matter, and commenting on topics. They're scared of disability related issues. And so what happens is, if we allow this culture of fear at the top to continue, then we will lose that power and influence that we need those leaders to be stepping into that, owning it and driving it across all parts of the business, and not just in pockets like training, D&I, if they have it, HR. But actually, where's the accountability in the supply chain? Where's the accountability in sales? Where's the accountability in your core functions,
Yeah. So you're having these conversations with these organizations, and would you say that you're almost targeting at a top level to trickle down in that effect?
Yeah, so absolutely. If we don't have that leadership sponsorship and it's proper and it's credible and it's authentic, people smell it a mile off. People smell. It's so boring now to hear we take inclusion and diversity dead seriously. We're really working on it.
Yeah.
Our marketing materials got tons of visual diversity in it. But actually, when you're talking to a community who know the company they work for, they know and they can see it and they can feel it and they can sense it. They sniff out this, narrative very, very quickly. And so we work to ensure that we're not just, sort of selling a dream, that there is authenticity and credibility to that program, and actually allowing leaders to be really comfortable with being uncomfortable, because change is complex anyway, but change around these complex issues is really scary. And if we don't create that psychological safety around these topics for leaders to learn and grow and to get it, and to, have an opinion and a voice of their own, that's where the credibility comes from. And that's what we work really hard to ensure that we've got that in place. And all of the interventions and all of the initiatives flow from that.
It's very interesting. Yeah. It's always that sort of question you ask yourself. I mean, at Growth, we obviously sort of want to represent that those sort of values ourselves and things like that. But I think, even myself, like thinking about what I can do to be more inclusive in that sense, because I think, it's something that we, as you said, like it's talked about a lot, but necessarily seeing it is a different story. And as someone, I probably don't suffer that any of those sort of experiences that you would have had potentially, from your background. So it's kind of trying to change a mindset and think about what we can do individually as well as organizationally, I guess. But I don't know if you have got any advice on that, really, for individuals to kind of change their approach.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting what you're saying, because I think part of the narrative is people forget we all have protected characteristics. So, in certain industries, there is an underrepresentation of men. In certain industries, there is an underrepresentation of particular age groups. In certain industries, particularly, we've got an issue with recruitment at the moment. So the halo effect, where we tend to gravitate to our image as the recruitment community becomes younger. Then we've got an issue with older candidates in the talent pools. And so I'm glad you said that, because it's that moment of reflection to say it's actually not just about race or sexual orientation or disability or whatever. We all have things. Now, we are, of course, overrepresented and underrepresented in many, in many of those demographics. And absolutely the view of the inclusion crowd is to look at making sure that all underrepresented, minorities and demographics have an equal and fair representation, in terms of reflecting society within organizations. And it's just really interesting if we look at why that's not happening, what's causing that. Because if you ask anybody in business, like yourself, you're saying, right, okay, well, what's my lens? Where's my privilege? It's interesting to then try and work out, well, if I feel open and I am sort of willing to learn and understand, I don't hold any of these particular sort of discriminatory views, then why do these organizations not reflect society? And that's when we get into the really tough stuff around, where does the performance management of that live? Mm-hmm. What mechanisms can you put in place to benchmark, to baseline? And the biggest, craziest one is data. 60% of the FTSE 350 doesn't even collect ethnicity data. And there's complexities around territory management and different geographic issues around data. And we're working with a German company at the moment, and there's some complexities there. Some really interesting stuff actually about ethnicity and collecting ethnicity, and again in the US and Japan. So there's lots of different things that we're working on around data, but ultimately in the UK, as long as we follow that sort of voluntary disclosure and we give employees a reason to want to disclose, to trust us in that, there's no reason we shouldn't be seeing data disclosure rates, night and day compared to where they are at the minute.
Yeah. And as you say, in a world driven by data at the moment, you'd think that would be a key sort of area that would sort of support this, I guess. So I guess it kind of leads on to the sort of question, really, obviously we're sort of learning technology experts, and that's, how we met you, Ed. But in terms of technology as a whole, or learning technology and data, I guess you mentioned there, how do you sort of see that role in tackling these sort of issues that we discussed?
I think it's critical, obviously, that we up the competency level. So we've got to have a baseline knowledge. We've got to really have an understanding of some of the academic, propositions behind this, concepts like social, let's say, race, protected characteristics, the law, what do we mean by positive action, all of these sorts of things. We spend so much time with training and development around things like manual handling, and in your organization, people might actually be more confident about knowing to bend their knees to pick up a box than they would be on how to create an inclusive interview, to make adjustments for neurodiversity, to look at how to support somebody transitioning at work, whatever it might be. We just have this void from a learning perspective, and of course that naturally creates an insecurity. If people feel like there's a gap in their knowledge, they will distance themselves from a topic. So just like that leader program, we've got to make sure that we are inviting people, we're making them curious. And so at Inclusion Crowd, we have done it through the lens of psychology. So we have developed all of our programs with psychologists, proper professional psychologists, because that whole piece of making people curious, making people interested, inviting them into that party so that they can find their own space in this is critical. And the technology bit is massive. We've got to make it about social learning. We've got to make it interactive. We've got to mirror how people interact with tech in their lives. And that's what I love about the growth engineering platform. And that's why, we've worked so hard to get this partnership together, because ultimately, that is, for me, the Rolls Royce of how we engage from a social learning perspective and how we harness the tech to support it. And I think what I love about the platform is that it allows so many different channels of learning. So, of course, from the gamification and the competition side, but also things like allowing for live classroom spaces, allowing for the calendar type functionality where students can log in and access learning at their own pace, is a very inclusive way to learn, because we need to make it bite-sized. We need to make it digestible. It's got to fit around all of our other, competing priorities, and the platform at Growth is just superb for that. Some of the additional functionality around asking the experts, having the experts in the platform, people can be asking live questions. This is the key to inclusion and diversity. If we make it dry, if we make it a one-stop shop, go here, watch a video, answer some questions, that is not how we change hearts and minds. That's not how we create an excitement and enthusiasm. And the tech part of that, I mean, obviously there's multiple bits, including all that live conversational bit. But again, it lives inside the tech, which is superb.
I think what you just said there about like the social learning element and the fact that social learning, I mean, we're obviously strong advocates for that ourselves, but it seems like that sort of creating a space where people feel comfortable to discuss it. So someone like me who doesn't necessarily know so much about it to kind of feel comfortable to ask those questions and kind of find the information that I would need to learn about it, as well as someone who is maybe on the other end of the scale and is maybe feeling more isolated and can come and kind of feel included as part of a community or whatnot. I guess it potentially can kind of solve a couple of issues there.
Totally. We've got to talk about this stuff, haven't we? We've got to have a conversation. It's dialogue, it's narrative, it's not knowing all the answers. It's being uncomfortable with, or being comfortable with the uncomfortable. All those cheesyisms, but they're true, aren't they? We're not gonna interact as humans if it's all two-dimensional and dry and tick box and the change in demographics is a big one as well. If we want to attract talent, we want to retain talent, we've got to speak that talent's language. And for talent that isn't of that sort of particular, the younger generation that's coming in, we also need to make tech that's accessible, that's easy to use, it's really, very clear, familiar functionality. And that way we can dial up the complexity behind the platform, the detail, the quality of content, all of that sort of stuff can be done. But the interface, and that's the critical bit. Do they want to come back and do they want to re-engage with our content? That's the sweet spot. And that's why we, growth engineering and inclusion, that's why we're both non-negotiable about it, because that is the future of learning, essentially.
Sure. Yeah, reduce as many barriers to accessing that knowledge as you can, I guess. So, yeah, I mean, it's really fascinating to sort of hear how you think it can be delivered, and obviously it's not. Ultimately, you're coming at it from a place of right. We can make positive change generally in these organisations, and that positive change can bring sort of lots of benefits, I presume. I mean, what sort of benefits could you think an organisation can expect from sort of making these changes in these fields?
Yeah, I'm a bit playful when it comes to the business case for D&I. I think if we look at a change curve, and if organizations are asking today in 2021 for the business case on D&I, they're probably at that denial stage of the curve. And that should be a really scary moment to think about the work you're going to need to do to get through that phase and actually get on with the hard work. But I know, because it's what I do for a living, that we have to engage with that. But ultimately, I'm a simple kind of person, and yes, there's lots of research. But if you have an organization where people can collaborate and be innovative and are comfortable not hiding who they are and are excited about progressing in your business because you've got positive role models, they can see themselves in your organization. You, in my view, don't need to be a rocket scientist to work out that productivity's up, innovation's up, collaboration's up, engagement's up. And, P&L is where you will end up seeing that. The results make their way to the bottom line. Gender balanced boards perform much higher. We see an increase in EBITDA performance. The statistics, all of the research are there. McKinsey are bored of giving us the business case in terms of D&I. I sometimes hear some interesting challenge to the business case of D&I, and I don't really engage with it, because I think to myself, look, let's be real. This is about how your organization performs. and your organization will perform better if your people are happier, they trust you, they're engaged in what they do, and they create a space where they can collaborate on improving your services, improving your products. They give a shit. They want us as a team to be better. And that comes from trust. And a lot of organizations have trust in their values and some description or, credibility or authenticity or whatever it might be. But like we said before, people can sniff out if that's just words on a paper or you're actually walking the walk. And the benefits are endless.
Yeah. I love how simple that message really is. The happier people are, the happier, the better performance you'll get from them. I think it sounds very, very obvious, doesn't it? Really, as a sort of philosophy. I think it's just about delivering it. So you talked about that sort of the kind of peak there and the initial kind of drop of realization. I imagine there's lots of businesses at the top of that at the moment, and as they're coming down into that realization, and it might be putting you on the spot a bit, but what sort of one tip would you say, you would give to those organisations as a bit of a taster of the sort of things that they would expect to learn if they were working with you?
Treat D&I like you treat any other commercial problem. You wouldn't dream of trying to treat a sales problem or put a margin issue or talk about, market segmentation or, how you're going to target clients or, whatever it may be, a process inefficiency program, a business improvement program, whatever it is, you already do it. It's not rocket science. It's not new. It's not reinventing the business 101. Yes, it's different issues, and yes, they are, they have their, nuanced complexities, and each one of those requires nuanced solutions. But you, in terms of a methodology, approach your business successfully, fixing stuff that doesn't work, that's broken, that's underperforming every day. And if I came to you and said, I'm going to fix a sales problem, I don't know how much I'm going to increase sales by, I'm not collecting any data. The data I do collect is really sketchy. I haven't got a program to improve that data. I don't know really what clients we're going to target. I don't really have any feedback from our different types of clients. So I don't really know how to amend our sales proposition to make each of those groups happy. But trust me, generally over time, we'll get better. We're on a journey. You wouldn't accept it. But D&I falls into this, we're on a journey. It's a people related thing. We're getting better than we were. We sponsor Pride and, we've had a bake sale. But, the reality is that you need to treat this like a proper commercial problem, because it is. You're going to lose competitive advantage in attracting talent, retaining talent. Your competitors are absolutely going to clean up in terms of talent and performance. Your clients are going to become more and more intolerant over the next 5-8 years. We're seeing it already in terms of bidding new business, the requirement for social value, real social value, social justice, D&I. So, you just won't win the business. You won't attract the talent, and you won't have that gene pool of, innovative, creative, upbeat, motivated, positively charged people. And to your previous question, the business case is there. Why we're not implementing it is because it's tough. It's easier to be in a room full of people who agree with you. It's easier to be in a room where you don't have to learn new techniques, understand cultural differences, manage in a different way. It's easier. And so organizations need to ask themselves, where do we want to be? Because easy is not where excellence lives.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's brilliant to hear that from you, Ed, and I think we're really appreciative that you've come along and talked about something that you're so passionate about, and I hope that we can arrange something similar soon and hear back from you again as the journey continues. Really, so thanks for coming along. and speaking to us.
Love it. And if anybody in the wider network wants to reach out, have these conversations, explore them, that's what this partnership with Growth Engineering is all about. Let's make this a collaborative, open process. And so anything at all in this space, do get in touch.
Lovely. Cheers, Ed.
Thanks.
So that's a wrap on the first episode of Growth Talks. Thank you so much for watching and listening. This has been a podcast brought to you by Growth Engineering. If you'd like to find out more from us, please do head over to our website, growthengineering.co.uk. We've got an abundance of resources, tip sheets and guidebooks on there, so please do go check it all out. And of course, thank you so much to Ed for joining us today on our first episode. It's been wonderful chatting to him and learning so much more about diversity, equity and inclusion. I hope you guys learned as much as I did. If you'd like to find out more from him directly, please do head over to inclusioncrowd.biz or reach out to him on the Superhero Academy website, where he is now a resident expert. And with that, thanks again for joining, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode.